All right, let's jump right into this explainer and really demystify exactly how the Indian legislature or parliament is structured, and more importantly, how it actually functions in reality. We constantly hear about bills, acts, and parliamentary debates in the news, but understanding the actual machinery behind those headlines is absolutely crucial. By the end of this, you're going to see exactly how the gears of the world's largest democracy really turn. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, so here's our roadmap. We're going to look at what the legislature is, break down the two houses, explore its core functions, walk through how laws are made, and finally tackle defection and some systemic flaws. So, let's kick things off with Section 1. What is the legislature? The lawmaking body of India. If you had to write a job description for Parliament, it essentially boils down to these three main bullet points. First off, it's a lawmaking body. It decides the national frameworks and schemes that govern the country. Second, it serves as a massive forum for public debate on literally any matter of public importance, which usually happens during the budget, monsoon, and winter sessions. And third, it's the main mechanism we have to hold the executive, the government, and the bureaucracy accountable for their actions, or, their inaction. But here's where things get a little complicated, and why the efficiency of this body is so heavily debated right now. Look at this number. Almost 50% of our MPs currently have serious criminal cases against them. Think about that for a second. When you have a room where nearly half the members are facing severe legal issues, it inherently changes the dynamic, and for sure impacts the quality of the legislative debates happening in that room. And unfortunately, it's a very similar story when we zoom in on the state level. Roughly 33% of members of legislative assemblies, or MLAs, also face serious criminal charges. According to the data, this is severely impacting the quality of state-level debates, which honestly are already struggling, simply because a lot of state assemblies rarely even convene for proper sessions anymore. Moving right along to Section 2, the two houses explained, Lok Sabha versus Rajya Sabha. Okay, let's do a quick contrast of the two. The Lok Sabha, the lower house, is directly elected by the citizens. That's universal adult franchise in action. It maxes out at 550 members and operates on a strict 5-year term. Now, on the flip side, you have the Rajya Sabha, the upper house. This one is indirectly elected. So citizens elect state MLAs, and then those MLAs elect the Rajya Sabha MPs based on their state's population. It's actually a continuous house with no set term, so it acts as this ongoing stabilizing force in the government. But if you follow Indian politics at all, there is really only one magic number you absolutely need to know, and it's right here, 272. Out of the 543 elected seats in the Lok Sabha, this is the mathematical threshold for holding absolute power. So what does 272 mean in practice? Well, whether you're a single party ruling on your own or a coalition of several different parties, you absolutely have to secure more than 272 seats in the Lok Sabha to form a government, period. The government is entirely accountable to the Lok Sabha. If, say, a ruling coalition's partners decide to pull their support and that number dips below 272, the opposition can trigger what's called a no-confidence motion. And if that passes, the entire government collapses and has to resign. Now let's be real for a second. A prime minister practically cannot sit down and consult 272 individual MPs every single day to make a decision, right? That brings us to the cabinet. The prime minister handpicks a core group of their most important ministers. We're talking home, defense, external affairs, finance, to form the cabinet. This small, highly concentrated, powerful group is the actual policy engine. They're the ones deciding what bills get drafted and exactly when they hit the floor. All right, let's jump to Section 3, Core Functions of Parliament, beyond just making laws. Parliament's scope of power is honestly massive, and it goes way beyond just drafting bills. Yes, they have legislative powers to enact laws, obviously, but they also have executive control. They guide the government through mechanisms like question hour, which is where having a strong opposition is totally vital. Financially, they hold the purse strings. They grant resources and approve taxation. Under Article 368, they hold constituent powers, meaning they can actually amend the Constitution. And finally, they have immense electoral and judicial powers. They have the authority to elect and, if necessary, even remove the president, the vice president, and Supreme Court judges. Let's get into the actual mechanics now, with Section 4, How Laws Are Made, the legislative process. Turning an idea into a law follows 4 pretty strict steps. First up is the introduction, which can be done by a government minister or a private member. Second, and this is because of the intense debate these bills usually generate, the bill gets sent to a parliamentary committee. Think of this as a miniature legislature that does the detailed, line-by-line scrutiny and offers suggestions. Third is the voting phase, where generally both houses have to approve the bill. And lastly, if it passes all that, it goes to the president. A bill only officially becomes an act after receiving presidential assent, which is just their official signature. But it's important to remember that laws aren't just born in a vacuum inside the walls of Parliament. The whole essence of a democracy includes outside pressure. Take the 2006 Domestic Violence Act, for example. That didn't start with politicians. It was actually drafted way back in 1999 by a group of law students and activists known as the Lawyers Collective. Through years of campaigning and massive civil society pressure, they successfully pushed the government to enact this incredibly crucial legislation. Now, there are some pretty fascinating shortcuts built into the system. Our sources highlight this concept called a money bill. Basically, if a ruling government wants to pass a controversial law but they don't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha, they can sometimes just label it a money bill. Once the Speaker of the Lok Sabha stamps a bill as a money bill, the Rajya Sabha practically loses all its power to object or block it. And the crazy part? That classification cannot be questioned in a court of law. As you can imagine, it's a highly debated procedural maneuver. And that brings us to our final part. Section 5, Defection and System Flaws, Troubleshooting Indian Democracy. So the system definitely has some notable bugs. First, when laws are rushed through without proper committee scrutiny, it often leads to massive public backlash, like we saw with the farm laws, which eventually required a government U-turn, or the Supreme Court just stepping in and striking them down entirely, like with the electoral bond scheme. Second is parliamentary privilege. MPs actually have absolute immunity from legal action for anything said or done inside the House. The source material even shares this wild anecdote where an MP literally snatched a bill out of another member's hands and tore it to shreds and faced zero legal consequences. And lastly, like we touched on earlier, the quality of lawmaking is in steep decline at the state level simply because those assemblies just aren't meeting enough to have real debates. But arguably the biggest bug in the entire system is defection. Picture this. You vote for a candidate because they represent Party A. But the second they win the election, they get offered a bunch of money or a fancy minister's post, and boom, they immediately switch to Party B. It completely undermines the voter. To combat this exact scenario, the anti-defection law was brought in through a specific constitutional amendment. But here's how that actually plays out in reality. The application of this law has a massive, glaring loophole. Retail defection, meaning just one or two individuals switching sides, is officially illegal. But wholesale defection, where 2/3 of a party decides to pack up and merge with another party, is totally legal. And the enforcer of this rule is the Speaker of the House. Since the Speaker is almost always from the ruling party, when opposition MLAs illegally defect to join the ruling government and pad their majority, the Speaker will often just sit on their hands, maintain complete silence, and refuse to take any action against them. So, having walked through all of this, we have to ask ourselves, if ruling parties can utilize procedural moves like money bills to neutralize the upper house, and they can leverage partisan speakers to completely bypass anti-defection laws, what is the true state of checks and balances in the legislature today? It's a structural reality that is constantly evolving, and honestly, it's something every informed citizen needs to keep a very close eye on. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll see you next time.